Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to Israelis and Palestinians for Peace Weekly Zoom meeting. Tonight we have a discussion about a unique two-state solution that our team, our members came up with, and we'll do a kind of a live discussion where we go through slides, but on each slide we will stop and invite everybody to ask questions and make it a discussion, and then we'll move to the next slide. And after we finish with all the slides, if we have some time, we will have just an open discussion about maybe relevant related solutions. So tonight's focus is really two-state solution type of discussion. We had different solutions discussed before, and we will have more solutions discussed later, but that's the focus of tonight. So with that, I want to say hi to Mauricio, who will launch the presentation and maybe introduce your team.
Thank you. Thank you, Maury. And you can hear me, correct?
Yep, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, beautiful. So the team is it's four of us, and we started this activity as a result of many text discussions that we found ourselves in the group. And so we've got, after about 350 posts back and forth and about 3 weeks of arguing amongst ourselves and trying to reach agreement, we thought that we had come together on a number of topics and that some things started gelling. As you heard in the introductions, it's four of us: Jeffrey Golant, John Assis, Issam Bitar, and myself, and two of us with Palestinian background, two of us with Jewish and a little bit of Israeli connections too. And so here we are to talk about what we have put together. So I'm going to share my screen, and then what you'll see is that we've got many slides. We've got about 10 to 12 slides, and the four of us are going to be taking you through that, and we'll keep it interactive. And so you can feel free to chime in, and we can go through those points and questions as we go through the slides. So I'm going to share right now. Let me just 1 second. There we go. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it very nice.
We can see.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the contents page. Okay, so we've got really a 7-point proposal, and what we want to do is first just go through some quick objectives, then take you through our proposal, describe it a little bit. That's what we say here. What is Carpe Diem? We called it Carpe Diem, which means seize the day. Sometimes we call it Carpe Diem Yalla, seize the day, let's go, because we believe the time is now. Then we have a slide on guiding principles. So some of the things that really governed our conversations, and we thought these were important principles that really took us forward when we were really getting stuck on some of the thorny issues. Then bullet number 4 is really where the bulk of the conversation probably will be, and we will all of us will share in going through the 7-point proposal in that slide. So I expect bullet number 4 to really be the meat of the proposal and the meat of the conversation. Then we added a slide to compare it with Geneva. Maury, you had mentioned in your invite that we wanted to keep that in mind. So we added a slide to show where we believe we are different and where things are pretty similar. I won't claim that it is 100%, keeping every aspect of the Geneva Accord in mind, because it's a pretty extensive document, but we did read it several times. So hopefully we're doing justice to the Geneva Accord document.
Excellent. That is a great idea. Thank you.
Awesome. Then we'll go through some objections that we already have heard during the text conversations. As you may recall, about a week ago, we did post the proposal in a text format into one of the posts, and we even did a little poll, and we wanted to essentially gather feedback. So we've put some of that in one slide. But of course, as we go through the whole presentation, you will also ask questions and raise certain objections, and hopefully we can not necessarily respond to every objection, but at least log and internalize, where the objection comes from, okay? Then bullet number 7 is really the detailed language that we applied. So that is really the detailed proposal. I don't think that we're going to go through each of those slides under bullet number 7, but we certainly can. They are in the deck. And so at any point in time, we can always page to one of those slides, and they are more textual, more verbose, and more detailed. So really altogether, they have been summarized in the bullet number 4 that I mentioned earlier, okay? And finally, the last slide, which is the next steps. Where do we see us going with this conversation? And obviously, Maury, with your help, we can take it to better places within the group, okay?
I'll see you 1 minute. Why do we see you twice?
Oh, because I logged in 2 times. I wasn't sure if I would be able to see myself once I was sharing. So hopefully that's not a problem. Is that okay?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, so I think we have done the introductions. Isam Bitar is one of our members. He's one of the 4, and he has something that came up very late last night. So he's going to join us for about 20 minutes as soon as he's able to do that, okay? But he asked us to excuse him because he's got something that just came in last night that unfortunately is taking him away, okay? But he will join during the presentation, all right? Okay, so wanted to set the stage a little bit for what are we doing here, right? And you can read the slide ahead of me if you like, of course, but we wanted to get feedback for sure. One of our objectives is to get feedback, and there are 2 kinds of feedbacks. What is the feedback that you personally, because these discussions have a very personal element, and you can't be all things to all people, but it is still extremely important to understand when somebody says something, is it because of a personal view that we have not realized? So the first component there is to ask you, what do you see for you personally as pros and cons of the things that we talk about? And the second one is really more general. What do you see are issues for the overall acceptance of such a proposal like this? If the proposal works for only a small number of people, then such a proposal could never really see the light of day, right? So obviously it needs to be acceptable for more than 50% of each of the 2 constituencies that we are addressing with this topic, right? So we would like your feedback also from that perspective, all right? What we're not here to do is to sell you something. We want to advocate, of course. We want to bring new ideas, but please keep in mind, we ourselves are very much in learning mode, and we are no different than any other member in the group. Some of us are older, some of us are younger, some of us may have more experience, some of us have less experience, but we do not presume to claim that we are any more experts than your average person in the group, okay? So please bear that in mind. We are just heavily interested people with a stake in this conversation, but we may have more or less expertise than anybody else in the group, okay? So with that said, let's go quickly into what is Carpe Diem, which is the name of our proposal. And with that, let me ask, John, do we know if Isam is here?
He liked my message in the chat, in our Facebook chat. Let me see if he's actually here, but he's on mute, so he's in. So if he wants to go through that.
Okay, let me
Then-
ask him. Isam, are you there? Isam, you're on mute.
He's in the Zoom meeting. I can do this one if he's not
Yeah,
here.
why don't you go ahead and get us started? So for everybody, the initials on the upper right-hand corner, those are the four members that are going to cover the slides. Go ahead, John.
Right. So Carpe Diem is a baseline proposal, which is a combination of a two-state solution and an EU-style alliance for trade, immigration, border management, and military cooperation. And it's also a process for perfecting the proposal to achieve acceptability by a majority over 55% of citizens of both sides. And that's very important. We work within the framework of Israelis and Palestinians for peace. And as Mauricio mentioned, this proposal started out as a discussion amongst four of us, and we'll continue to onboard feedback from the other members.
Very good. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to see if Isam, are you able to join?
Hello, yes, I'm available.
Okay, go
Hi,
ahead.
sorry about that, everybody. So to those who don't know me, my name is Issam Bitar. I'm a British Palestinian. I lived 16 years in Nablus. And yeah, I'm part of the group who has come up with this hopefully interesting idea or framework for peace. So moving on from what John has been talking about, I'm going to move on to some of our key guiding principles. And in general, what we're looking for here, really the most important principle that guides our framework is the right to self-determination, whilst also at the same time enabling the other side to fulfill their goals and aspirations. So we are more forward-looking than we are backward-looking. So we didn't try to reverse, these 100 years of bad actions. We also didn't look at dealing with all of the disputed topics, but rather provide what we think of as the most important topics to start a process, and then leave the more minor things to future. So what we provide here is 7 main topics that we believe are essential to start any meaningful progress. And we try to handle that in a balanced way, in a way that would allow for both parties to have somewhere to start their negotiation process. And further from that, we also focus on the important point that this is a process between Israel and Palestine. We have made no provisions that would depend on other countries to achieve peace. Rather, it is something that is only for Israel and Palestine to resolve their differences and claims. Another key guiding principle is that we want nobody to be evicted, and nobody to be displaced, and nobody to lose their citizenship. The new area on which the state of Palestine would be sovereign would be of the same square footage as the 1967 Palestinian borders or Israeli borders. And we assert the right for Israel to define itself as a Jewish state, the right for Israel to have its security not be compromised, and the right of both Israel and Palestine to have a historic claim on Jerusalem, on the old city, including the Temple Mount. So we recognize this historic claim and this historic connection of both peoples and of both future sovereign states. And all of that also guides us to, takes us to the principle of the state of Palestine being what we call a normal country. What we mean by that is that it has the right to defend its sovereignty, to defend its borders and control its own immigration, and to establish its own trade deals with other nations. But at the same time, it would also need to abide by any military, trade, or immigration agreements that it would have with its neighbors, which includes, of course, Israel. Now, in addition to these guiding principles, we've also outlined a few differentiating principles. You'd move on. Yeah, thank you. So the key differentiators from other run-of-the-mill two-state solutions. So one of the first ones that we discussed, I think, at the beginning of this presentation is that it also adds an EU-style alliance. In addition to these, we also allow for a viable contiguous Palestinian state. So we've tried to keep land swaps to an absolute minimum. And at the same time, and for that, it required not dismantling settlements, but at the same time, we also don't allow for the settlement enterprise to overtake or erode the sovereignty of Palestine over Palestinian land in, within the 1967 borders. It also, as we said, binds the two countries in an EU-style alliance with an integrated minority of each state residing in the other, which we believe is important to provide a set of permanent common interests that guarantee future cooperation between the two sovereign states. We've also provided for a just and equitable solution for Palestinian refugees, which has also not been addressed in previous or in other two-state solutions. And this is an important one for us as well, is that it respects the democratic principles by employing local and national referenda, which we will discuss in more detail as we get into the individual topics that we have in our framework. We focus on an equal reciprocal partnership between the two states, not a master-vassal relationship, which is extremely important in maintaining a just and lasting peace that wouldn't devolve into, well, another conflict or a continuation of the old conflict. And of course, our proposal guarantees that Palestine's right to control its own borders, defend itself, and maintain its sovereignty, just like any other nation. So yeah, I'd like to now pass the torch to Jeffrey.
So, guys, we agreed to make it an interactive discussion. So I would like to ask participants here, do you have any questions or comments on?
Please, by all means, yeah.
On the, on the principles and key differentiators that they presented so far.
Yes, I do.
Same here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please, Avi, go ahead.
Okay, I have two questions on you, or three. When you say a normal country, you mean that the Palestinian state will have, if they have all rights, as every sovereign country, they can build also an army. And nobody can tell them from the outside how big it should be or how strong it should be. And at some point are not who are their friends and who are their enemies. And I'm sure that it's a big obstacle from the Israeli side. And that's a question, if that's what the necessity, I mean, in all about equality, there is no question, I think, among all of us. Don't think that anybody think here that it shouldn't be equal. But it doesn't have to be equal in all senses, which doesn't really involve the feeling of people of equality. It doesn't get on pride. Okay, I want what they have, I want to have it also. But it's get on something that is in balance. And I think an army, it's really a problem. And I think it's one of the obstacles on the way to state solutions, not the only, but one of them. And the other thing, what we should think, I mean, Jerusalem, I think, will be a problem because where you set a border, I think it's much better if it's one city ruled by both than to try to put. Even Clinton tried to make the mountain he made a line, an horizontal line over the Wailing Wall, and it didn't satisfy it. Anyway, Arafat wasn't satisfied. And the last thing that I want to say, and I think it's an argument that most of the time doesn't come at all. You know, these 67 borders are totally artificial. It's actually a ceasefire border. It's nothing that we set and dealt and whatever. Okay, it's created a certain reality. and I think that it will be just forever a problem for Palestinians to squeeze themselves in this 21%. Maybe I'm wrong, but all the talks, and I had a lot of them in the circle, parent circle, every time when they said, okay, die la kivush, first of all, occupation and the occupation. And from all of them came, and then we will talk about Yafo, Akko, and so on. So it's something that can't satisfy it, I think. That's I think the major problem of two-state solution. But go ahead. I said my
These
part.
are good points. If I may, Jeffrey and John and Isam, if I may take a stab at it. So we will go into some details on the topics that you just mentioned in the next couple of slides. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but in the military, we are very aware of the topic that you have brought up. We are proposing a 20-year scale, a 20-year timeline, and even there, it's not trivial. I think all of us understand that overnight, nothing like a strong military presence could be achieved. So we will be talking about military, and you'll see, hopefully we are thinking about what timeline can be put in place, and also other mechanisms like inspections, certain, tighter controls. At the end of the day, I think the short answer to your question is it can only be a gradual process, and maybe it doesn't get to 100%, but we can't be at zero either. We felt there is some necessity for Palestine to really evolve into, if there is such a thing as a normal country, to have some type of ability to defend itself. And so hopefully some of those details will help to address the topic, Avi, that you just brought up. We'll also talk about the holy sites and the borders and how things get split up, in particular in Jerusalem. So I beg you to wait on that one, and we'll get to it. I don't think we have a great answer on, the green line versus some other line, but one of the things that we will talk about is how the two share the whole land. One of the main features of this proposal is that even though it's a two-state solution, it also enables a significant amount of citizens of one country to become residents of the other country. So this is through what we've called the EU-style alliance or union. And so it is not just a two-state solution. We also want to create an EU-style binding alliance that enables citizens of one to reside in the other, and we'll describe what that looks like shortly. Okay, so those are some quick answers, Avi. I don't know, Jeffrey or John or Isam, if you want to.
Yeah, I'd like to interject actually, because I also need to go. But yeah, I want to urge our audience to so a lot of these questions I'm sure we will answer at least in part as we get to the the separate 7 topics. So I would, unless you have an actual problem with anything that we have discussed in particular, I think a lot of the questions will be answered at least in part as we go through the presentation. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to add.
And by the way, what Avi said, some of it is question, but some of it is really, an opinion and comment, and that's fine. We now have it recorded, and we can look at it and think about it also later. Yazid has his hand raised, so Yazid.
Hello, everybody. I have several points. I will just raise them as bullet points. The first one is concerning the settlements. You said that there will be no eviction of settlements. And I think that settlements, as you all know, is one of the most crucial, I would say one of the thorniest issues in the whole peace process, if we want to call this as a peace process that is going to lead to an eventual Palestinian state, an independent one, of course, with sovereignty. So not evicting the settlements, in my opinion, is problematic. Second point, regarding the EU-style alliance, I would love to hear from you what exactly you mean by the EU-style alliance, because the EU-style alliance, as I know it from the EU integration, is a bit requires a lot of issues that need to be resolved before we think of, of how this can take place, given the fact that we're not going to think of Palestine as you defined it in terms of like purely sovereign state with its own military that will, as you said, also will gradually be built through steps of what you call building trust steps, if I put it this way in my own words. And this would lead me to the third point regarding this idea of graduality, that you want this to happen over time to get this trust from the Israeli side that things are going in the right direction, which is always, unfortunately, on the Palestinian side to prove their goodwill in that regard. And given the Oslo Accords, we have seen that this has proved a failure, a total fiasco in that sense. Thank you.
Sure. Let me address that, those questions. First of all, the issue of settlements that we understand is a very controversial hot button issue, and it is addressed in our next slide. We will discuss that very soon and lay out in detail our thinking about that, which is very much out of the box. It's a new idea. It hasn't been part of the discussion that we're aware of before. So we're coming up on that. So I will pass that and come back to that in a minute. But I do want to explain, because it is such a key component, I think, of our concept and our vision here, the notion of the EU alliance and what we mean when we say that. And we can talk about World War I and World War II, and also ever since the Middle Ages, we've had, intense ethnic, religious conflict in Europe. And we've seen destruction and death that, far exceeds anything that's ever happened in Israel and Palestine. And today you don't see that. Today you have communities that maintain their cultural, political, legal independence and function very much like an integrated cooperative society where people can move across borders without so much as showing a passport, where people can live in France and work in Germany, and that's not even unusual. That's the goal. That's the model that we suggest for our reimagined two-state solution that we've put forward and that we're going to be talking about here today. So under that model, issues such as the borders, the 1967 borders or not, really the stakes for that go way down, because we're talking about an integrated cooperative regional, a binational region where what side of the border you're on is not as important as previously it would have been under the more traditional two-state model, because we're imagining that you can live in Palestine and you can work in Israel in a frictionless sort of way. You can cross the border for lunch. That's the goal that we recommend both populations work towards.
Thank you. Emmanuel, you're next.
Yes, can you put back the previous slide?
Yep.
So, okay, the statement that Israel's security cannot be compromised is by virtue of the fact that there will be Palestinian sovereignty, Israel's security is compromised the way Israel views its security. Okay, so this is a statement which is just devoid of context, and this is the main issue I have with the plan. First of all, it's a two-state solution. Okay, it starts off with a two-state solution with the confederal arrangement around it. But the problem is the two-state solution, which is the problem in the first place. The fact that, like Avi said, okay, the 67 borders are not, first of all, they're not agreeable to Israel as a base, and they're not satisfying for both populations. Right? So we have a huge problem here. I mean, this reads, I really sympathize because it reads like a nice plan, but it's devoid of political context. Because the way this will be structured to the political sides in Israel, it just won't fly, okay? Because it's something that is, again, it compromises the security of Israel, the way Israel looks at its security. Israel at this time will not allow another sovereignty next to it. So how can we deal with that? I don't think this way is the way to do it, but let's continue with this because it's important.
I think,
Can-
if I may, sorry.
Okay.
I would ask the question that I would ask Emmanuel. You say Israel will not allow another sovereignty next to it. Okay, just to build on that thought and understand it, Israel has borders with Egypt. It has borders with Jordan. It has a troubled border with Lebanon and a troubled border with Syria. So there are sovereign nations next to it. What is unique about this?
Because this is an area that Israel claims and wants to have its sovereignty over it, and it will not allow in that area another sovereignty. Okay, it's a completely different issue because the Palestinians are, of course, contending that territory as well. So it's a much bigger problem in the first place.
Israel is not annexed the West Bank. I think the game would change. The game would change completely if Israel annexed the West Bank, right?
Yeah.
But we haven't actually got to that point yet. And
No.
I think this is our attempt to build a solution which is going to allow for free movement of people, and it's going to allow for Jews to happily live in the areas they call Judea and Samaria. It's going to allow Palestinians to live happily in Haifa and Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. So we're trying.
No, I understand your intentions. I understand your intentions. I have no problem with the intentions. They're just completely devoid of the political context Israel operates in.
When Israel, I'm only speaking for myself at this point, but when Israel annexes the West Bank, then my position will switch to the Palestinians who live in the West Bank need to have a civil rights campaign for equality, right? But we're not at that point yet.
No,
we're not at that point yet.
Well, I don't agree with you. Okay, while Israel has not annexed the West Bank as of yet, that doesn't mean it will permit another sovereignty there. Israel is very happy with the status quo, okay, and likes the status quo very, very much at this time, and will not permit a two-state solution. Okay.
Oh,
we're going beyond the scope of this discussion at this point.
So Emmanuel, what you say actually does not reflect the polls that I shared with you, which were done just last month by IDI and Israel Democracy Institute, and basically shows that only 37% of the Israeli population support the status quo. And as a matter of fact, 61% combined are looking at a peaceful solution, either one state or two state.
But that's not reflected in the Knesset. The polls
of Emmanuel, just a second. I know.
Okay.
So the Knesset did not, people that voted for the Knesset did not vote for this particular issue only. Okay, so when people vote to the Knesset, for example, if you are an Orthodox Jew, you are most concerned about your rights as an Orthodox Jew and your, budgets and institutions and the Shabbat. And if you are, if you don't like the personalities of Meretz and Avodah, then you may vote for Yair Lapid and even for Kahol Lavan, but that doesn't mean that you are right-wing necessarily. I know my father is one of these people, for example. So again, that poll is actually one that asked the people about this particular topic, and that was the results. Okay.
No, I have no problem with the polls. I only have problem, and we don't have problem with the polls because the people are a lot smarter than the politicians. Unfortunately, it's the politicians who run the show, and the politicians in the Knesset, the 80 Knesset members are against separation and against the two-state solution. And they're on record in that way, okay? So until that changes, this is something we have to deal with.
No. Of course, one of the reasons we're here is to build a campaign that is changing public opinion and eventually also changing politics or influencing politicians, right? Now, a point that you made in the discussions that we had several times, you said, well, you have a 2/3 majority in the Knesset against a two-state solution, but there is even larger percentage of the Knesset that is against any other solution. So even your solution.
Other solutions are not discussed. What solutions are discussed at all? Nothing is discussed. The only thing that even comes up in the political context is a two-state solution. Nothing else is being discussed. Not confederation and not federation and not a one-state solution for sure.
Right.
Okay.
So you can't assume that you have a majority, a larger piece of those politicians for your solution.
I don't. I've never made any claim to that effect. What I'm saying is that we have a very large majority against the two-state solution, not for what we have.
And that's indeed our objective, to change public opinion and
I agree
with that. But again, it's getting a little bit too much of a discussion here, and we want to continue with the presentation.
I want to say also something. Yeah. First of all, I think that still the two-state solution is the most popular among Israelis. I think also among the Palestinians, but I'm less know the effects there. But we have to take it into consideration. And I think the most important steps that was shown until now in this presentation, and was already said, that it takes time. We can't look at the situation today and say today Israel doesn't agree. Of course, today Israel doesn't agree. The conflict is going on. People are fighting and people are killing and whatever is going on. So today Israel cannot agree. But we are not talking about something that is going to be tomorrow morning. We are talking about gradual steps. We are talking about building trust. We are talking about changing the atmosphere, changing education. It will take time. So.
And it's not.
This is the most important thing in this plan.
Yes.
It's not just Israel that doesn't agree. The Palestinian consensus does not support a two-state solution at this time either. What we're trying to do is propose a new approach to the two-state solution that would be more attractive to both populations.
Thank you. Hamza, you're next.
I think that said it very well, what Jeffrey just said. We're trying to put a framework together that we think, and we would like to know from you personally, and also what you think the general public would say, that this approach is better than today's status quo. Maybe it's not, or maybe it's better than the status quo for each of you and all of us, but we still believe there are many large constituencies out there that will put a red light on it, or Knesset will not agree to it, or Palestine will not agree to it. That can all be true. The question that I would put on the table is, as we go through the points, do you believe personally for you, that this improves versus today's status quo? And if not, why? And secondly, do you think that some of these, even if you agree with all of this, that some of these have red lights that are so big that other people will just tip it into the red because they are so contentious that they will never agree to it, and we will not achieve more than 50% acceptance in both sides, right?
Thank you. Hamza, you have your hand raised, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mori. Regarding settlement issue, I believe that idea of not evacuating anyone is more optimistic and something of rose dream than what could reality tolerate. Regarding settlements, I understand that it's impossible to evacuate the majority of settlers. That's right. But when you're talking about evacuating no one, when you think about it, there are thousands of settlers who live deep in the West Bank, and the majority of them are the kind of boys of hills. You can't this group can't integrate with the Palestinian community, I think. I mean, if some settlers are like Tamar Zandberg, I would welcome her. Actually, I will elect her as my president. I have no problem. But you can't live with the people like Baruch Goldstein, Ben Gvir, Smotrich. Do you see what I say?
Yeah.
So at least I know that it's a nice idea, and because it show comfort for anyone who seek a solution, because there is no conflict in the process of conducting that solution, but and implement it. I mean, but it's not realistic. That's what I mean.
Yeah, Jeffrey,
Sure.
and I'm going to ask that once Jeffrey talks to this point, if you guys are okay to move to the next slide, because I think through the questions, we're actually covering all the detail that you haven't seen the material yet. So Jeffrey, go ahead, and then I'll go to the next slide, if that's okay,
Right.
Maura.
Well, Mauricio, let's go to the next slide and let's at least outline how we're treating the settlements, and then we can address the points that are being made.
Yeah.
So as you can see, we're going to skip a little bit. The settlements are the second point in kind of the hot button list of tricky topics that we take on. Okay, the first one being Jerusalem, but we'll come back to Jerusalem. That's hard too. Let's start with the settlements. And under our vision, because one of our guiding principles, of course, is we have more than one guiding principle in play here. One of them is we don't want anyone to be displaced. Nobody, not one person. There's been enough of that in the past, and it needs to end. Number two, we see conceptually, and this, we're all four of us, we live in the United States and Britain. So that certainly impacts our perspective and our philosophy about this. But we see no logical reason why, I mean, we're aware of the realistic situation today, why, however, in the long term, you could not have a substantial minority of Jews living in Palestine. And of course, we already do have a substantial number of Palestinians living in Israel. We not only see this as entirely possible, we see it as very desirable. So with that in mind, we propose that the settlements would not be dismantled. The settlers will not be moved. However, the land where the settlements are built on would become part of Palestine. And the existing homes would legally, this was kind of a legal concept designed around the same notion as consulates. We don't want there to be any sort of government dispossession involved, so it would remain legally titled to the Israeli state. But the homes themselves would be properties that people could exchange, sell, rent, however they would do that. And these homes remain, these settlements remain in place in Palestinian territory. The occupants of the homes would have status in both countries. They would keep their Israeli citizenship, and they could acquire either Palestinian citizenship or residency. And by the same token, to the extent there's any adjustments in any borders, any Palestinian people who end up on the Israeli side would get the same status. So what we are doing with this, to kind of to button it up, is instead of, we're leaving the communities in place, but the communities would lose their character as settlements. They would just become another village or another town on the other side of the border.
But you don't. But you are not speaking about Mother Teresa. You should know this.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. There will be, for sure, this is not something that can be smooth across the board. We know that many of the people that are in the settlements are not going to be sympathetic to have other homes built around them. We know that they're going to be extremely concerned about security. We know they're going to be extremely concerned about their ability to drive back and forth to mainland Israel. We know all those things will happen. I don't think we can guarantee that incidents are not going to happen. I think it's impossible to guarantee that. But at the same time, to the settlement people, we wanted to say, we wanted to make sure that nobody is evicted. And number two, we wanted to protect all of the homes, all of the buildings, all of the infrastructure that has already been created, that you have built, and that it will not be expropriated. And so one of the things that Jeffrey talked about is, it's not, they don't just become any standard village in Palestine. They are protected, the homes are protected under a Israeli government trust, which means that, I don't know if it's a good analogy to use the word consulates, but you all know that when you have a consulate from another country in your country, you don't just go in and go inside and do whatever you want. There are certain rules and you need to respect that property. Something similar applies here. All of the property of the settlements would be held under an Israeli government trust. So any infraction against those properties is really an infraction against the state of Israel. So there is that protection. On the other side of the coin, it's not a ghetto. It's not a walled city. It's not an island. It must be open. And the people who stay over the years will need to know that they will be essentially living in a community that's becoming more and more heterogeneous. And some folks will never accept that. And we are not able to address those folks. But we do believe that a good majority, hopefully much more than 50%, will be willing to live in such communities as long as they are protected, as long as their property is protected, and as long as they are not infringed on. So maybe we're wrong, but that is our assumption.
That's right.
Maurizio, I want to say, you know, and it's not even a question, really, it's my opinion. And I just want you to think about it. And I know that I said it before, but I will say it here for the record. So I see multiple levels of issues with your approach. And I will start with the one that talks about justice, okay? The settlements, especially all those who've been built in the last 20 years, many of them illegally by Israeli law even. We have more than 100 of them that are illegally by Israeli law. But all those settlements have been built after it was clear that this is a disputed land and the entire international community was against it, okay? So it's not like, you know, evacuating a person who has been living there for years and years and is a result of a situation. No, they knew what they are doing and they tried and they are still trying to create situation on the ground that basically takes advantage of the power of Israel and want to create a situation where a two-state solution indeed will not be possible. So I think this all, from a justice perspective, again, it's very similar to a case where, Mauricio, think about it, you live in Sunnyvale, California, and I guess you have a nice front yard in front of your house, and somebody comes with an RV and puts his RV right there on your lawn, on your front yard, and then come the police and say, I'm going to protect this RV because He believes, and he has reasons to believe that this land, he has rights for it. And so now let's make peace, and I will keep my RV on your lawn. How's that sounds to you? And that's
Well-
exactly how it feels for the Palestinian. That's exactly how it feels for the Palestinians. Now, you're going to make a peace with them, but all the atrocities done not going to be undone in any way, shape, or form. And again, some of the atrocities you cannot undo. People who died, people who got who spent time in jail and things like that, you cannot undo it. But moving back settlements to proper Israel is something that you can do. Moving the settlers. And it's been done in the past, and it could be done, although not in that scale, but it could be done. And again, I'm not suggesting 100% of it, because you can have a swap of land type of solution. So some of the settlements could remain, especially the big ones. But yeah, as a principle, I think it's a problematic one.
If I may, Maury, I think that you said the operative word there, especially the key ones. So, we were looking, for example, at the Geneva Accord, and Geneva Accord had land swaps for the larger settlements, right? So now that was already 20 years ago, and there are more settlements on the adjacent to the Green Line. And so we were thinking, if we applied the same reasoning as Geneva Accord, we would have this ugly effect of looking at land swaps that would basically introduce so many teeth into the West Bank that you start jeopardizing continuity. We were shy to say, you know what, let's do land swaps for many settlements. Now, personally, I'll just speak out of turn only for me, myself. I certainly would have no issue, right, for land swaps on the bigger settlements. But I think we wanted to first say what may be better for Palestine, other than evicting all the people from the big settlements, is not to do a land swap, to allow those areas to stay within Palestine, but to accommodate the human beings who live there. So we thought it's better to not have land swaps, because it takes away from the continuity of the Palestinian state. Of course, one can have a more extreme solution to say no land swaps, no settlements at all, and dismantle everything. I think the reality is some settlements should and could and probably will be dismantled, like you said, certainly the ones that aren't even according to Israeli law. But other settlements, I think we all have to expect, will stay. And we thought, how do they stay? There are two options. You do a land swap, or you leave them with the people intact inside sovereign Palestinian territory. Those were the two flavors that we debated. And somebody could convince us to say, well, you know what, it's better to just land swap them. But we thought it really affects the continuity of the West Bank.
I want to suggest something very simple. Once we decide about the settlements, and if Israel will agree to compensate, so most of the settlers will move back to Tel Aviv, to Givatam, to wherever they came, because most of them, even if I repeat the previous point, that it will take time, and I'm sure creating the solution will take time, most Israelis, most settlers among the Israelis will be ready to move back. So it's not a matter of evicting them or doing it by force. Most of them will do it voluntarily. There will stay some that will want to stay in their homes. They can start. I don't care. They can stay there. They can be either Israeli citizens, they can be Palestinian citizens, they can be just like the Arab Palestinian population in Israel, which I hope in time of peace, two-state solution, living at peace, both will have full rights. Either they live in Israel or they live in Palestine.
This would allow that, Avi, right? This proposal, it's not stated, your idea is not stated, but I think it could be an idea that we add on to it that says Israel will offer compensation to the settlers to move back, and those buildings are lost for this program. They're no longer protected, and settlers come back to mainland Israel. I suppose that is not difficult to add.
That's not difficult to add, but it's a little bit of a departure, I think, from the concept. And I realize the concept is a very new one, and it probably requires some further explanation. But as I understand, my personal take on our joint concept is that we envision that some individual settlers, probably a large number of them, especially the more ideological right-wing elements of that group, would not choose to stay in the settlements under this arrangement. They're going to leave, in all likelihood, voluntarily and make arrangements to return to the Green Line. However, and maybe this is extremely optimistic, maybe wildly so, we also contemplate that there may be another group of people that would be excited to take part in this proposition and who would take their place. Because we understand there's a lot of conflict and tension between at least some of the existing settler population and the existing West Bank population. But our thought process is that you can have Israelis and Palestinians living in the West Bank in a non-hostile way, and that would be beneficial towards the development of peaceful coexistence and the binational region that we really have in mind here.
Exactly. I envision a peaceful coexistence between an Israeli majority and a Palestinian minority in Israel, and a Palestinian majority and a Jewish minority in Palestine. So this entire proposal is about reciprocity, and it's about if one country is allowing its minority to live, freely and securely, then the Palestinian state should also allow its minority to live freely and securely. So, as a Palestinian, the sort of country that I want to build is one where Jews feel accepted and tolerated and free to live there. I don't want, I think Netanyahu said some years back, he supported the settlements because he didn't want Judea and Samaria to be Judenrein, so ethnically cleansed of Jews. Well, I agree with that, but then I don't want the settlements to exist as enclaves. I want the settlements to be integrated into Palestine. So the Jews who live there are also Palestinians.
So John, I have a question for you. Being one of the representatives of the Palestinian here,
sure,
in this team. From your understanding of the Palestinian majority opinions and politicians' opinion, do you think there is even 5% of Palestinians, 10% of Palestinians who would agree to keep settlers and keep their properties, as Israeli properties after a peace agreement? Do you see that even remotely feasible?
We're arguing, I think, for a paradigm shift in the way that people on both sides are kind of going to have to look at this and understand this. I accept your point that probably among the Palestinian population, that one particular point would be a difficult sticking point. But there's a lot more in the plan that is going to make it attractive to Palestinians, such as cross-border access with Israel, such as a peace deal, a long-term peace deal, such as Palestine becoming a normal, sovereign, free country. I think Palestinians will be interested in the broader plan. Yeah, I think on both sides there's going to be compromises, right? There's going to be things in this plan that many Israelis are going to hate or dislike, but we have to figure out a compromise, and I think we have to be creative and unconventional and outside of the box. And I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at the to look at the facts on the ground and to work out a solution that is pragmatic.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to say something. Yes, I will try to keep it short. One have to differentiate between the two types of settlements. There are settlers that are there because of because it was cheap, because the government support to settle there, and because the air is very fresh, fresher than in Tel Aviv. I guess that some of them, maybe most of them, I don't know. It's one can find out later. Will leave the place and will go back because it will be more convenient to go back to Israel. And those who can stay, okay, maybe they will stay under these circumstances. But we have to understand that I wouldn't say the majority, but not a small part is there totally because of ideological reason, and not because the other aspects. If you just take Hebron, Al-Khalil, as an example, you can see what kind of friction is created there. It won't stop at that moment. And because they are there for that ideological reason that they think it is an Israeli sovereignty, I think it's much close. I agree with Moore totally that they don't have the right to be there. But, sometimes right is not always, or the just is not always wise. I mean, you can try to be just, but it's not a wise solution in the end. And I think to try to sell to them such a solution that they will stay there under sovereignty, where there are reason to be there, is ideological, based on the Bible that it's all Israel, will create a much bigger conflict than what it was when Gaza had to be evacuated. And I know you are against the evacuation. I don't think
we
that
allow them to stay there under this.
I know. They don't.
Very religious settlers who say my community has been in Hebron for 3,000 years, and we have our deep religious ties in the tomb of the patriarchs and all that. They still get that under this.
No, you don't. No, I think that you don't understand how they think. They don't think that they have the right to sit there. They think that it's belong to so-called big Israel, the Israel of Israel and David together, and that's the ideology that moved them. And therefore, I believe that in that case, if such a proposal comes, and not because what Emmanuel said before, that most Israelis see it as Israeli sovereignty. Most people don't travel there. I don't think that most people don't care at all about it. If there is security in Israel, if their security is secured, they don't care about the West Bank. But this small majority, which is such an hardcore, will cause a civil war. That's what I believe. And we are not 20 years back, because you mentioned the Accord of Geneva, or if we take in 95, when Rabin said, "I won't let 100,000 people to hold the whole country on their throat." We are not dealing anymore with 100,000. We are dealing with something that's much, much more got to the heart and brain of people in Israel. And I think it will be a very, very, very difficult plan to sell. Very, very difficult.
Sure. There's a group that hold these views. I agree with you. But is there any other option that they would accept other than the status quo or outright annexation without extending civil rights to the population? Probably not, right? I mean, we're certainly not going to have anything close to unanimity on anything.
But we're not discussing alternatives. This is a completely moot discussion. Nobody's putting anything on the table other than a two-state solution and things around the two-state solution. Nothing else is being discussed. Not full annexation, not the implications of full annexation and civil rights and not civil rights. Nothing is being discussed except two states in this version or the other.
Emmanuel, so we had the full discussion about federation. You've been there, and now we are talking, to understand this plan. And we are not maybe, after we do this plan and the one-state solution plan and so forth, maybe we should have a debate between the different plans. But right now, indeed, it's more to understand their plan. And let's not even try to argue too much. We can all say what we think, but we will not probably reach an agreement here. And as a matter of fact, I want to get to other areas other than just settlements. So I would ask Yazid
let's
to
move.
be, I'm sorry, Yazid has his raised hand, but again, if you can just be brief on your comment on the settlements, and we can move on to other topics as well.
Okay.
I think the other thing I would ask the audience is, don't just look at what the issue is, but if you know how it can work, also say so. Okay?
You ask me?
No, anybody.
Yeah,
Avi, again, I think you spoke enough. I mean, not enough, but we have to keep a fair share here for other people and also for the agenda that we have for the room. So Yazid, please go ahead.
Again, I don't want to frustrate anybody, but there are some interesting points that have been raised, especially the point by Avi. I mean, I lived near Baruch Mazel in Tel Urmeida in Hebron for almost 3 years. I lived also near Beit Hadassah in the center. I mean, they're very close by, the two settlements. I would, call them even, I don't know how to call them. And I lived there for 2 years. So I lived in Shara Shuhada, which is the Shuhada Street, basically, where all this, mess is happening. And I tell you, the life for me in that area was an extremely difficult experience. We lived for 5 years in total, and we had to leave, the whole neighborhood because it was an extremely terrible experience on all levels. So I'm really concerned about this issue of living next to certain Israeli settlers who hold very, I would say, racist, I would say racist views about everybody. Not only about the Palestinians, but about everybody.
I think under our solution, if Baruch Goldstein wants to go and kill some Palestinians, he's going to be held accountable by the Palestinian justice system, right? So I think if settlers who would then turn into Palestinian citizens, Jewish Palestinian citizens, commit crimes, then they're going to be held accountable by the Palestinian laws and probably by the Israeli laws too. So of course there's frictions. Of course there's frictions. We're trying to figure out a way to work through those frictions. And
that's a very good idea. In my opinion, when you want to get rid of these frictions, or at least not deal with these frictions, you need to basically do everything that you can to avoid, such frictions from happening, because such frictions would actually make will lead to a total explosion of the whole situation, like what happened in 1994 when Baruch Goldstein entered the mosque and killed 29 or 28 Palestinians while they were praying. And at that moment, I was in my house near Baruch's Mazel house in Tel Urmeida, and we were not allowed to go get out of the house for almost 40 days. And this basically, what happened after that? The whole peace process was in tatters. So one person could actually sabotage the whole process.
We're trying to avoid that. We're trying to avoid.
That's what I'm saying. That's my point. You need to make sure that when you have some people who might sabotage the whole process, and this is what actually happened when Rabin was assassinated, and when the Palestinians who were praying in the mosque were killed by Baruch Goldstein inside the mosque. So basically, you have two elements. You have people who want to destroy the peace process in the Palestinian territories, and you have also some people in Israel proper who want to destroy the peace process. So you need to make sure that such friction would never ever happen, because we have learned the lesson, at least from what happened.
What is the best way, Yazid? what is the best way to solve that? Do we
have to
take those
evacuate all
people
the
and evict
settlers.
them? Do we
You
evict
have
them
to
or do we
evacuate
annex
all
the
the
island?
settlers. Sorry, you have to evacuate all those settlers who basically are very troublesome. You have no basically tolerance for the existence of such settlers anywhere in the occupied territories.
Okay, so
Nowhere.
Yazid,
You can
are you
always
saying that you have to evacuate all settlers
all
because
settlers
they're
with
settlers,
this
or
kind of
only those who
mentality.
won't live?
No,
only
you-
those
you
who
need to
won't
ev-
live peaceably.
Listen, I'm not trying to say that this the idea of living together is impossible. I'm saying living together is always possible unless you basically you choose the people you want to live with. That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
So
Because
I
you
think
already
we're saying the
know.
same thing. I think those settlers who would behave in a way that would concern you are not going to be welcome and are not going to be tolerated.
That's not what I'm saying. You have to take these people out of Hebron. You have to take them out of all these areas where you think they will immediately or at any moment, unexpectedly, for any reason, would just make this,
We can't.
explode.
We can't impose an
convict
ideology
people
to
of
us.
thought crimes. We can't convict people of thought crimes, but we won't tolerate the behavior that you're
Exactly.
concerned about.
Okay,
That's
guys,
That's an
we've
interesting
spent a
point.
lot of time on the
It means that
settlement.
you will not, I mean, sorry for the interruption. I'm very sorry, Maury. But this means that you don't know what the situation is really like. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let's, Jeffrey, let's move
No,
to
guys,
point
we
number
will not,
4.
again, we will not reach agreement most likely. We heard the different opinions. I want to go next to the different topics like Jerusalem and the other.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk to the
right.
other points. And so, Jeffrey, one thing I want to
So-
make sure we cover is also point number 4. So why don't we go do Jerusalem, Jeffrey, and then we'll jump straight into number 4, because
Okay.
number four is probably for the audience here one of the strong differentiators that makes this plan a hybrid between 2 states and 1 state. So I do want to get to number 4, and there will be a similar conversation as the one we've just had, but I do want to get to it. So let's start
Sure.
with Jerusalem.
Let me quickly introduce Jerusalem. I like your approach there, Mauricio. I think you've got it.
Mhm.
So obviously, Jerusalem has always been a problematic sticking point in any discussion. Our approach is similar to Geneva, similar to Camp David, but there's 2 primary innovations, I think. The first one is we treat the holy sites, well, there's 3. One of them is we separate the concept of sovereignty and administration. There's precedent for this in the world. For example, Hong Kong is part of Chinese sovereignty, but it's a city-state that administers itself, or at least it used to until quite recently. So our concept allows both joint sovereignty over Jerusalem, but a unified administration. It would be necessary, in our view, to draw lines and to actually have a border, although the concept is the border would not be visible and would not actually restrict movement. And the way that we get to this border, we are using the idea of individual choice or popular sovereignty. There would simply be a precinct by precinct referendum, and all occupants of the city, to the extent it's geographically feasible, would make a choice. We don't think there's going to be very many surprises in the choices that they would make. We realize that. But we do think it's important that the lines be drawn by the people who are most affected. So the populated portions of Jerusalem would essentially choose which side of the border they want to be on. And we are striving for administration in the holy sites in a non-denominational way. We want everybody's religious rights to be protected, and we want to separate the religious aspects of the conflict and de-escalate them. One part of the way we do that is we're looking for a joint commission among Israeli and Palestinian clergy, and we would suggest that the time for the Jordanian involvement has come and gone.
So let me ask for clarification. On the Temple Mount, there would be shared sovereignty. There would be some kind of line, invisible line, an agreed upon line, but shared sovereignty. That's what you're saying?
No, there would be a line, and the Temple Mount would be on the Israeli side of that line.
So the Temple Mount would be Israeli sovereignty.
Well, hang on,
Yes.
Jeffrey. Jeffrey, just if I may, I think
Okay.
we actually tried to stay away from, for example, Geneva Accord did something which was basically micro-sovereignty. They color-coded every single location, and they basically divided up the old city into micro-sovereignty lines. So the Western Wall had a color, the Al-Aqsa Mosque had a color, and every single site and every single area had a color. And so the old city altogether was a hodgepodge of many micro-sovereignties, and it was still governed by a joint municipality combination of Israeli and Palestinian municipalities. We actually stayed away from micro-sovereignties, and we said the entire area is joint sovereignty. And then in the Temple Mount, of course, Al-Aqsa is going to be managed exclusively for Muslims, Western Wall exclusively for the Jewish services. But in the Temple Mount itself, we said we wanted to enable a different management than today, where today it is only possible for open worship on the Muslim side. We wanted to have a process where other religions have the ability to also worship without having to hide. Now, that may be important to some people, not important to others. In many rabbinical areas, they will tell you, we don't even want Jews to go up there. And other rabbis will say, no, I think it's okay. We know where the Holy of Holies was. Anyways, long story short, we would like to open the Temple Mount in some degree to open worship by other religions. It's in particular Jews, right?
That's guaranteed when Messiah come in the future.
Right. But the sovereignty, I think.
For now, it's not a debate.
The sovereignty would be joint. I think in the entire proposal, this is the one area, the old city, which is joint sovereignty. Okay. Joint sovereignty means both own it. Now we can, like I said, we could debate, we could say, no, the Geneva Accord was better. It really split it into 20 different sovereignties, micro sovereignties, color coding. Maybe that's better, but where we landed was joint sovereignty for the old city, including the Temple Mount, including some adjacent ancient sites, joint sovereignty.
No, I actually like that better for the old city. So that's my personal opinion. Anybody wants to ask a question or comment on that? Okay, looks like this one went smoothly.
Well, you know, this one did cause some, on the text line, there was quite a bit of debate about the Temple Mount and whether Jews really want to even go there or not. But okay, you know, it depends on the audience, right?
We're just tired. We're just tired.
That's also true.
You know, what's interesting, I found.
You know, that's the Japanese negotiation tactic, right? To make you so tired and then agree to everything.
Well, I will be honest, many times I found that some of the folks who are either Israeli Jews or diaspora Jews are making the argument for the Palestinian side. And so there were quite a few people in the text side and the post saying, well, you know, you're going to start World War III by asking Jews to pray there. And my answer was, well, can I please hear from the Palestinian folks? And most of the Palestinians in the group were saying, I have no problem if Jews want to openly pray. Why do you think I have a problem with that? So I'm not saying that's across the board.
Once the national conflict is resolved, the national conflict between the two nations, there won't be any problem of praying together on the Temple Mount, on agreed upon areas. Just clear.
That's exactly the point. I think the issue today is not religious. The issue today is religious, and Sorry, the issue today is national. Jews that go to pray on Mount Temple do it in order to make it provocative that it's Israeli place. That's what Sharon did almost 20 years ago and caused the second Intifada. And but once we solve the national issue, why not? Let's pray everybody. Let's pray everywhere. I'm not going to pray anyway, but it's not matter. But if it's possible to all over the world that mosques and synagogues and churches are sometimes in the same buildings for a matter of economic or for savings, why not in it? Why not here? Just let's solve the problem, the issue, the national conflict. That's all.
So let's move to number 4. I know this one will take also significant time, if I may. So what, as you know, this is a 7-point proposal, right? So we have one row for each of the 7 points, and the fine print is in the slides at the end, which we're not going to cover today, but you know, you're welcome to read, of course, the fine print. So point number 4 is about transit and immigration. And I would say to you that this is perhaps the one area that in this proposal, you can see a significant difference versus a vanilla two-state model or a one-state model. And so this point number 4 is in a way what bridges the two kinds of solutions into what we are proposing. And what point number 4 is saying is that even though we recognize or we believe that Jews in Israel, Palestinians in both sides, that they all will be looking forward to a sovereign state for themselves, meaning Palestine and Israel, with land for them, for you know, two lands basically. At the same time, we wanted to address what we believe is a fact, which is that members of both communities have a aspiration to be able to still be a part of the land of the other. And so what we did not want to do is cave into the demographic threat that is always discussed, which is one state solution, everybody is a common citizen, and on the Jewish side, the fear that there will be a Palestinian majority and Israel will no longer be a Jewish state. But we also, on the other hand, we did not want to say, oh, we have to keep both sets of people isolated. There are reasons from both sides. Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza eventually, but for sure in the West Bank, want to be able to reside or visit frequently mainland Israel, and they want to be able to be there not only because they may have family, they may have visits to holy sites, but they may want to have jobs. And so sometimes it's better to commute, sometimes it's better to live in mainland Israel. There will be a tremendous need for Palestinians of the West Bank to continue to be able to transit or even be residents, not voting citizens, but residents of mainland Israel. And conversely, there are many Israelis, Jews and Arab Palestinian Israelis, who will want to also be able to be in Palestine. It could be on the religious side because Israeli Jews want to live in Palestine for biblical and religious reasons, or it could be other reasons. Maybe they simply want to invest and they like the weather, or it's more economical. So what we did in point number 4, and this is this third blue box that you see here. This blue box says that there will be a program, all of you are familiar with the term green cards, right? So residence permits that both countries will issue. We didn't want to say what number, you know, I don't know if it's if it's 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, or some other number. But what we did say is we would like both states to issue an equal number of residence permits for the other side. And that means that if you have a healthy relationship, you can say any Israeli Jewish person that moves to Palestine, you can say for that person, there is another person who is a Palestinian who is living or he's a resident in mainland Israel. And it is a balanced situation that benefits both countries because both countries want to continue to partake in each other's economies and lands. And of course, you all know this is reality today in Europe, right? You have French people and German people, and they have their own citizenship, but they can live in each other's countries. And this reality, we think, bridges the two-state model, which isolates people, and the one-state model, which merges them all together with a single citizenship. We think both of those are suboptimal. We think point number 4 here is what enables the sovereignty and at the same time, people to live in each other's countries without the threat of voting against the interests of that country or voting for laws that would benefit the other country, right? So let me pause there and see if what questions you would have.
Until people raise hands, I will ask a question. So one of the reasons we currently have walls, and there is a wall, or at least attempt to build a wall, for example, between the US and Mexico, is that when you don't have a wall, you have 2 types of immigrations. One of them is economic one. Another one is, in this case, could be related to terrorism. Because again, even if you have a peace, you have to remember that there will still be a significant number of people who are not happy about this peace, okay? And maybe that will change over many years, but
Right.
certainly in the initial years, you should expect many groups within Palestinians to oppose this peace agreement, which for them, I can tell you, looks more like a surrender type of agreement than a peace agreement. And so if you don't have borders and if you don't have fences and walls and all those things that are awful, but if you don't have them, it makes it very easy for those terrorists to cross the border and blew some buses and blew some restaurants, as happened in the past in Israel. So that's the security issue. Right. And then also you have the economic issue, which is, there is a huge inequality in the economic situation between Israel and Palestine. So you will have hundreds and of thousands of people interested in going to Israel without a permit. What do you do about that?
Right. So let me talk about a couple of those things. So in terms of the walls, on the second blue box, what you see there is, we're not on day one looking to take any of the security checkpoints that exist today. Now, over time, the hope is if peace is achieved, it's a gradual process. Even in Europe, when they established, the ability to go from one country to the other, it was gradual. It was easier, but it was gradual. In our case, we said, look, inside of the West Bank, those walls need to go away. But between the West Bank and mainland Israel, there needs to be still the checkpoints that you have today, but they will relax over time. That needs to be managed. That needs to be simply managed. And that's all I can say, right? It will be as difficult as people make it. If people cause problems, security will stay slow. and people will have trouble going across. If security can be relaxed, it will be relaxed over time. I think the other question, Maury, was people, are we going to have a wave of, hundreds of thousands of people wanting to live in the other side because of economic reasons? Well, what I was saying earlier is both countries will agree on what is the number of permits that will be provided. These are for permanent residents. I'm not sure if you were talking about permanent or just.
No, I was talking about illegal people who would cross illegally, because it's possible. Again, the same issue that the U.S. has with Mexico, right? When they cross illegally.
Okay.
Israel has immigration enforcement today, right? And I think that would still apply, as Palestine would have immigration enforcement. I just want to say on the notion that this would be a surrender for the Palestinians. I strongly object to that. Actually, I believe this is an agreement from my perspective, which has been negotiated between equals, and I think it envisions a Palestinian state which is going to exist alongside Israel as an equal, as a sovereign equal. And there are going to be extremists on the Jewish side who say it's a surrender. All of Judea and Samaria are ours. And they're going to be extreme. They're going to be extremists on the Arab side who are going to say this is a surrender. All of Haifa, all of Tel Aviv, that's ours, from the river to the sea, etc., etc. But the point is, we want to marginalize the extremists. I don't see this as a surrender at all. I see this as an agreement between equals, and I feel very strongly about that.
I agree with you. Again, I was referring to those extremists and how we able to contain them. And I think what Mauricio said makes sense, which is we don't take away the checkpoints immediately, and we don't take away the walls immediately, and we do it gradually. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I don't think millions of Palestinians will move into Israel. It didn't happen before the wall was built. The wall was built for security reasons. They could have done it between 67 to 2002, or whenever they started to build the wall, and they didn't do it. Most Palestinians live in Palestine. Most Israelis live in Israel, and we can deal with those who want to move, or those. I think the main problem is with the reunion of families or getting married. So we can find the way with the naturalizing laws and whatever. I think the current situation is terrible, because even if you don't give somebody full rights as a citizen, you don't have to avoid him from licensed driving and health security. But this is another point. But I don't see a big flood of Palestinians coming into Israel only because here economy is better. They can come to work here. Most of them will go back to live in their neighborhoods, in their villages, because of culture, because of family, because of schools of the children, and whatever.
Yeah, Avi, you're completely right. The same situation is within Israel. There's also a big economic gradient between the Arab areas and the Jewish areas, and the Arabs don't move into the Jewish areas except for a small amount of people.
Okay. Yazid, you have your hand raised, or is it still from before?
Yeah. I would like to ask the question concerning the EU-style paradigm of arrangements between the two entities, between the Palestinian entity and the Israeli entity. Have you thought about the Commission? Because when you think of the EU, you think of the Commission, which is a supranational entity, and which means that this Commission has more competences in certain issues than the individual countries. In this case, we're talking about Palestine, we're talking about Israel. So these two countries will have to basically give all their sovereignty in certain areas. And when we talk about the movement of people, as you mentioned, the flow of capital, the flow of services, the flow of workers, these issues, as you have already mentioned, should be basically given to the supranational authority, which decides, on these matters from a technical perspective and from a policy perspective. So we're talking about an entity that has been absent in the presentation. This is one aspect. Another aspect is about the eventual, like what happened with the UK. The UK, I mean, decided to exit from this EU-style arrangement. And have you thought about the fact that this might happen, that the Palestinians will say, oh, would like to exit from this arrangement or from this accord, or Israel, we would like to stop this because the flow of workers is a problem. The flow of services or the flow of goods is really harming the economy. This could be the case in the case of Palestine. People would say, no, sorry, this is going to harm the local economy, and Israel more competitive. Comparative advantage is on the side of Israel, so we cannot go on with this arrangement. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was actually thinking about that last night between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. What would happen, if there's Brexit? In the detailed slides, we did add a comment that says that essentially the alliance is an integral part of the peace treaty. Any attempt to have a Brexit situation would render the entire treaty null and void. However, what's more important really to say is this EU type of union or alliance, number one, would absolutely require the same or similar type of processes that you see today in Europe, where you surrender some of your legal sovereignty to, on specific topics to that body. And the other thing that's important to say is not only do you need a commission and potentially a parliament to be making the laws, right, for that union, but the other point that's really important is that this alliance, in many ways, is really self-standing, because it's talking about things that are of mutual benefit. It's not something where you say, well, it's a quid pro quo. The alliance helps you in one thing, but it's bad for one party, but that one party is getting some other good things as part of the two-state element in the proposal. No, the alliance itself is right now envisioned and should be self-standing for its own benefits. Now, you can't leave the alliance. The whole treaty would be null and void, but the alliance itself stands as a standalone item for the mutual benefit of both. So legislators will be, making changes, adapting, for example, on the number of green cards that are issued. They might start with, I don't know, just pick a number, any number, 100,000. And then 5 years later, they might say, that number needs to go up or it needs to go down. Let's discuss it. Those kinds of topics would be addressed by this body. And yes, that entails on specific topics a loss of sovereignty for each of the two nations. No different than what Europe has done, right?
Okay, guys, we have like 7 more minutes for this event. Avi, can you make a very short comment?
Yeah.
And then we'll wrap up, okay?
Okay, very, very short. Not to go to a discussion, I remember in the 80s when I lived there were many Palestinians from West Bank or whatever who were working in Israel. Economically, Israel was always more beneficial for them, and they had a free movement. I don't remember if they needed a license for that or not, but it wasn't a big deal just to cross the border. There was no big immigration to Israel. I don't think, as you said already, that's not the point, because we're not talking about right of return here. We're just talking about being there. The problem is, and I think that it will stay like that, this solution will stay for many if you want, like the right-wing Israelis, you have the right-wing Palestinians. We will never be satisfied with that, and we'll try always to harm. And the experience showed that you need just only 2 buses that explode, and this fragile trust that you maybe build that with so many people break immediately. That's how the Israeli left was gone. It just evaporates after, and I think that this point is so fragile that it's very, very difficult to deal with it. It's still for me that it's you made very good thoughts, but I don't think that they are to realize. That's all.
Thank you. And
Avi, I'd like
very much. Yeah, John, you want to?
I'd like to say something to that. I think it's inevitable that there will be more terrorism possibly from both sides, right? But the point that we have to get to is we have to rise above that. We have to prosecute the terrorists as individuals, and we have to move on as nations building peace together, because we can't let terrorists derail this. The Palestinian terrorists who blow up buses do not represent me. Baruch Goldstein doesn't represent you as Jews or Israelis. These are extremists. We have to marginalize them.
Exactly. I want to thank everyone for talking to us today. I have to excuse myself a few minutes early to go to another meeting, but it was really interesting discussing all of this, and I look forward to talking about it more.
Thank you. And again, indeed, we are wrapping up. Maybe Mauricio, you want to say something?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for the discussion to everybody. I think what I would like to do is to follow up. Maury, you'll help me with the names from the attendees, but we took some notes. We will want to onboard the things we've heard today. If you all can remain to some degree engaged with us, we would appreciate it, because these are extremely good points that have been brought up. And ideally, we could understand not only why it won't work, but what's in your mind about what could be better, what could work. And maybe even if some of you are interested, bring a few other members into our gang of 4 so that it maybe becomes a gang of 8 and eventually more. And the more voices, the harder it is to agree on anything. It took us 3 weeks to agree on what you see here, but I would love to see if we can onboard conversations with you personally, with the 4 of us, and even induct some of you into the process. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Whenever you want.
Okay, I think I will post something in the Facebook. I thought that I will make about it about this solution. Just write it down and post it there. So maybe you can have you can thread it.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll probably put a post to collect feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, Mauricio, I would just suggest that you share your presentation and maybe put it somewhere and a link to it, so that people can review the details and maybe even comment right there. If you make it to, on Google Share or something like that, then the people could also comment right there.
Okay, and just for everybody, I did put the slides have been posted into the group. So there was a post from 3 hours ago. So everybody can find that post already. And so please add comments there. The slides have already been posted to the entire group.
Okay, great. Thank you. You're ahead of me. So Hamza, you wanted to say the last word.
Yes. I believe that the two-state solution is the optimum solution for our case. We have some problems with this particular proposal regarding also the control. And I think in general, it's a great proposal. And I believe that we can have more kind of counter proposals, which we can mix all of it and have a better one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
first, I want to say thank you very much for all the 4 people who put so much work into this, and with your leadership, Mauricio, really appreciate it. It's impressive. I want to say that, in my opinion, this group should not focus its all attention on a solution. I think really the focus should be on creating a large amount of people that would influence politicians eventually to come to the table and agree on something. And that something could be, in my opinion, any of the solutions proposed here. I don't care, it's better than the status quo. I think that, again, there's a limit to the capacity of these people in terms of thinking about all the details and understanding all the issues and all the so I find it a little bit you know, how can I say it? I mean, again, obviously, if this is your passion, go with it. But I'm saying, in my opinion, this group should actually try to think, how can we make this group bigger? How can we make activities that will make an impact on public opinion? And so again, that's also why I introduced the Peace Olympics. If people have seen this post, I would like to motivate people to be more engaged, both in inviting other people to this group and suggesting peace activities and actually committing peace activities on the ground and here on other social media forums. So I would hope that you can all take active participation. I know Avi already have done a good job in introducing it and inviting a lot of his friends, and some of them were already joined. And so that's wonderful. So thank you again for coming up. We will have next week, we're gonna go back to the Wednesday schedule, and hopefully to see all of you and many more on Wednesday, next Wednesday.
Thank you. Bye.
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 More, I have one question. This club telephone connection